On today's show, who will be the Houston Rockets' most valuable player, defensive player of the year, and most improved player this season? We use audience polls plus our own voting to come up with who the most likely candidates for each award are. It's all coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
Throw it up to Jalen Green.
Sengun here in the short row. Oh my, that's the no-look.
Jabari for three and the win. Yeah!
Look at Tari, Eason.
Cooking comes Tari. No!
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
The Houston Rockets select Alperen Thompson and Cam Whitmore.
One thing I have never done is not made the playoffs, and so we want to take that step here as well.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian, a credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you listen to your podcasts, including YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thank you so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on the way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you for making LOR part of your day every single day. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, none other than Alperen Sengun, the X's and O's man, who you can track down on Twitter or X or whatever it is at Rockets_Insider, here to discuss the Houston Rockets awards that we're going to be handing out that we think a certain Rocket player or players have a chance to earn this season. That is, who will be the Houston Rockets MVP, most improved player, and defensive player of the year. Now, these are not the awards that the NBA hands out, but these are who we think will be the most important in those respective roles for the Houston Rockets this season. Alperen, it's been a minute. So happy to have you back on the program, man.
Yeah, I had my little vacation. I feel like that's what it was, right, Jackson? Pretty much vacation, getting refreshed for the season. I don't think you're so refreshed today, though, Jackson. What's going on?
I've got the suds, no doubt about it.
For all of our YouTube viewers, I am dressed up as SpongeBob from the Suds episode. So here's your YouTube Easter egg for today's show. I feel like crap. This is my Jordan flu game, Alperen. It's going to be great, which we all know that the flu game was basically just Jordan being hungover. So I promise I'm not hungover on this episode. I actually feel like crap. So let's go ahead and get through this. I apologize for any sniffling along the way, but this was a fun episode that we wanted to tackle, and I think it's a really interesting episode. Shout out to the LOR listener who came up with this as a question for our mailbag episode that I actually wanted to dedicate an entire episode to because I thought it was such a fun topic to discuss. So let's start, Alperen, with Defensive Player of the Year. And the way we're going to do this is you and I are going to cast our votes, our ballots for our top 3 picks for each award, and we'll have like a point system in place. I also ran polls on Twitter and YouTube, and so those polls will also count towards the point totals. So we may have some ties, we may have some, I don't know. We'll figure it out along the way. Do you want to go with your DPOY picks first? Because I feel like this is going to be the easiest award for us to pinpoint.
Wow, you think it's easy? I think it's going to be a little difficult.
Okay.
To pinpoint. Not the number one, but more so who the rest of my ballot is. I think number one for me is Dillon Brooks. I think he's one of the most elite defensive players in the NBA. There's been talk about pinpointing possessions in the FIBA World Cup where he's gotten beat off the dribble. Every defender gets beat off the dribble sometimes, but what he gives you from a perimeter, on-ball, point of attack defense perspective, while also being somebody who can help shore up your help defense, which is where the Rockets struggled the absolute most last 2 seasons. It's a runaway for me that he will be the Rockets Defensive Player of the Year, and he can really help elevate them from being a bottom 5 defensive team to at least a middle of a pack defensive team.
Okay, so Dillon Brooks comes in with your number 1 pick. I also have Dillon Brooks as my first place vote. So again, with the way we're doing this, we're doing first place, second place, and third place votes. So we're doing it just like the MVP voting or any other awards voting across the NBA landscape. So first place votes are worth 5 points. Second place votes are worth 3 points, and then the third place vote is worth 1 point in the grand scheme. So I'll do the math over here on my end, which is bound to be a dumpster fire given my sickness and the fact that I have zero aptitude for math. So the numbers are probably going to be all over the place, but I'm going to do my best, I promise. So across the board, sweeping first place votes for Dillon Brooks, because I also have Dillon first. Twitter had Dillon first, and then YouTube also. Or I apologize, actually not sweeping first place votes for Dillon. The YouTube poll for the LOR community actually had Jabari Smith Jr. with the first place vote. 40% of the YouTube poll chose Jabari Smith Jr. Their second place vote went to Dillon Brooks with 39%. An incredibly close race between those two guys for the first and second place vote via YouTube. So right now, Dillon far and away the leader for Rockets DPOY. And I fully agree, right? You see the type of impact that he's having with Team Canada right now in FIBA action. And when I was rewatching some of his play from the big time win against Spain, what really stood out to me, Ali Khan, was his help side defense, right? The way that he rotates over, the way that he kind of at times erases mistakes by his teammates. And that is going to be such a huge benefit for this young Rockets team with young players who are still trying to figure out NBA defensive schemes, where to be on the court, all that stuff. So not only is he going to be able to take some of these young guys under his wing and teach them how to be better defenders, but he's also going to be able to erase some of the mistakes that we're bound to see still from Jalen, from Jabari, from Amin Thompson, the other young guys on the roster. These guys are going to make mistakes, and having guys like Dillon to step in when they do is going to be absolutely amazing. Who's your second place vote going to?
Yeah, my second goes to Fred VanVleet. I think Fred's going to be second, and not because he's the better defensive player than who my third pick is, but because I think right now as a veteran and somebody who can really help create a lot of deflections, among the league leaders in deflections, also somebody good off ball, having that veteran presence in there is really going to help this team, especially at the perimeter, point of attack, right? It's really important. I think in FIBA World Cup, there was a play where Dillon Brooks hit a three. Everybody's talking about that big three he hit to tie the game, but nobody's talking about what he did defensively at that same time was during the possession after, stepping in and kind of forcing the ball handler into a turnover out of bounds, leaving his player, moving over, trusting his teammates. I think stuff like that player recognition, along with something Fred is really good at, which is playing the passing lanes, that 1-2 punch for me will play really well together defensively for the Rockets. So that's why for me they're 1 and 2. And then third for me, Jackson, and you can share your second and third. Third for me in terms of DPOY is going to be Tari Eason. I think Tari is going to be a guy who Ime trusts a lot. He's mentioned him and Jabari multiple times, but he's mentioned Tari, I feel like, more in regards to defensive capabilities, talent, skill set. And if Ime's mentioning you in that capacity multiple times, you can only imagine what he has in store for what Tari will be doing this season.
That's a good point. I think that you're going to be the odd man out here between me and the Twitter poll and the YouTube poll here, because none of us had Fred VanVleet in the mix there. I think Fred VanVleet will be an impactful defender. I just don't know if he's going to be one of the top. You know what? And actually, your vote for Fred VanVleet and your reasoning behind it has me reconsidering a little bit. But I just think that the overall defensive impact that on an individual level that some of these other guys might have, as well as from a team construct might play out a little bit better, because Fred, at least from what we heard about him in our Locked on Raptors crossover episode with Sean Woodley, Fred has actually slipped a little bit as far as his individual man-to-man defense. And so he might not be quite the perimeter the perimeter defender, the point of attack defender that we, expect him to maybe be in a Rockets jersey. It's not, but he's still a fantastic team defender. So I think his team defense will be a big help, but I think on an individual basis, Fred might actually struggle a little bit defensively, whereas some of these other guys might not. I've got currently second on my list. I've got Jabari Smith Jr. for my second place vote, and then I've got Tari Eason for my third place vote. So doing the math over here really quickly, Dillon Brooks is the far and away favorite to win Rockets DPOY. He got a total of 18 points across the board as far as all the votes are concerned. If I did the vote tallies right, I think I did. I'm not 100% sure. You know what? The math on this is not going to work out, Alec. If I try to do this math live in the show, it's going to be awful. We just know that Dillon Brooks is far and away the favorite to be the Rockets DPOY. You think Fred VanVleet has is a sleeper pick to be a really important element of the Rockets defense?
Yeah, and look, you could disagree with me, Jackson. I think fans may disagree with me too. I just think having veteran presence there is really important. I don't expect him to be an all NBA team defense guy. I just expect him to have an impact in terms of the way they're playing their scheme. And to me, that's impactful when you're considering a DPOY. DPOY is not just one player, right? It's also about how they impact the overall scheme. I think having a guy like that, veteran guy who can help not just lead and put people in place offensively, but also defensively as well, because they're going to rely on him and Dillon Brooks to do that. So that's why for me, they're 1 and 2. Not in terms of anything else, but just more so veteran presence there, 1 and 2. But I agree with the Twitter poll. I agree with the YouTube poll. I agree with you. I think Tari and Jabari 2 and 3 also make a whole lot of sense. And hopefully that is the case, because those two guys will be anchors for their defense for years to come.
My decision to also go with Jabari as my second place vote plays into one of my votes a little bit later on, which we're going to get to the Rockets most improved player and the players in that category, as well as the Rockets MVP for this upcoming season. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets back, guaranteed. That's $200. All you got to do is wager $5. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from point spreads to player props, over-unders, and so much more. Right now, you can take a look at the outright betting favorites for Super Bowl 58, the Kansas City Chiefs at plus 600, Philadelphia Eagles at plus 800, the Bills at plus 900, and rounding out the top 5, you have the Bengals and the 49ers both at plus 1,000 points apiece. The Texans all the way down at the bottom at plus 18,000. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. And as we were going between breaks, a bit of breaking news just dropped mid-recording for Alicon and I. Breaking news sounder incoming.
Oh my.
Christian Wood signing his 2-year deal with the Lakers. Shout out to Rockets legend Christian Wood, finally finding a home after being just adrift at sea for so much of this NBA offseason. Quick thoughts, Alicon, before we get to our most improved candidates for the Rockets.
I think it's incredibly impressive that he got a player option out of that. I'm really eager to see how he fits with the Lakers. Could he be a piece that's traded at the trade deadline, similar to how they traded away Thomas Bryant? For some valuable picks that led to something else. Who knows? But for Christian Wood, if you struggle playing with LeBron James, I don't know what else there is to say. LeBron will get him going. He just needs to knock down some shots, play next to LeBron off the bench. It's a good chance for him to have a resurgence in his career. So let's see if he does it.
Playing next to AD might be phenomenal for him too, because AD can make up for some of his defensive limitations as well. So we'll see how that front court pairing ultimately works out and whether or not Christian Wood is able to find a permanent home with the Lakers. But let's go ahead and dive into our Rockets most improved player candidates here. Now, my picks, this is one where I'm curious to see where Alicon's votes are going to be, because my picks, the Twitter picks, and the YouTube picks all lined up across the board on this one. So I'm just going to list out all of ours because we're all uniform across the board. You're going to be the odd man out potentially, Alicon. So, most improved player, first place vote for all three, Jabari Smith Jr. Second place vote for all three, Alperen Sengun. Third place vote for all three, Jalen Green. And we can get into the reasons behind all this. Jalen is third. Jalen is third for most improved. Because again, remember, this is most improved from where they were last year to where we think they'll be this next season. So I think
people are thinking Alperen Sengun was the Rockets' best player last year over Jalen Green. I like, my thought process would be that you would have Jalen Green as most improved and then Alp second. You see what I mean? I'm pretty surprised by this result. It
could be, right? But I do think the group of Rockets fans who had Alp as the Rockets' best player last season were probably I don't want to say a vocal minority, but I do agree with your point, right? It does make sense. If Alp was the Rockets' best player last year, then there is less of a leap for Alp to take to be this year's most improved player. But I think under Udoka, and I think in a system that actually utilizes some of his strengths, I think we'd see a world where Alp is actually averaging like 20, 12, and 5 in his sleep pretty much. That's basically what he was doing in FIBA action. So that's some of my reasoning for Alp where I have him. But I have Jabari with my first place vote, and so do YouTube and Twitter. What is your first place vote, Alicon? Where are you going?
My first place vote is Jalen Green.
Okay.
My second place vote is Alperen Sengun. My third place vote is Jabari Smith Jr. Now, if you're an avid listener of the show, you remember the show we did. And in Summer League, I said Jabari Smith Jr. is that's number one like prospect on this team. Jackson, you remember me saying that, right? Just to make sure that context is there. You remember me saying that.
Absolutely.
Now, the reason why I put him at 3 is because he is still 19, 20 years old, and he's still learning. He's still, trying to grow his game. And as long as he takes some sort of leap, I'm okay with that. I don't expect him to be this superstar already. I think he's going to take a leap, but I also think that Jalen and Alpy will take even bigger leaps as well. And I think a good example of this is the Sacramento Kings. Let's just focus on Sacramento for a second in the comparison I'm trying to give. De'Aaron Fox, when he made the playoff run, I think it was 5th or 6th season, right? Domantas Sabonis was like his 7th season where he was a big focal point, all-star like his 5th, 6th season. It takes some of these players a little longer sometimes to develop into what everybody envisions them to be. And I think Jalen and LP are on that trajectory, not necessarily taking that long, but, let's keep giving them time to continue to grow. Jalen's growing into his body. He looks great. Alp's growing into his body. He looks great. You have two guys who both privately, Jackson, you and I have both heard, they look great. They're in shape. They've been very impressive in summer league in summer workouts with the team, and also Jalen with Team USA. So for me, I think either way you put Alp first, Jalen first. For me, it's just Jalen, just because of what I've been hearing about him in the offseason and how impressive he's been. To me, he's number one. And then Jabari for 3, not because I don't view him as a guy who's going to take a big leap compared to what he did last season, but I just think he's a young player. We need to continue to be patient with him, but I do think he still, to me, is that prospect on this team who I'm super excited about and very high on. So for those reasons, I think that's 1, 2, and 3. And I think Jalen for me is going to be he's going to impress me with his passing. I've also heard, not just in terms of his shot making and his handle have improved, I've also heard that he's been working on his pick and roll reads, and with the reads come passing. And so I'm really excited to see how well he does from a passing perspective going into this season, just considering how much that's being talked about.
For me, when I look at it, and so I was able to do the math very quickly, successfully this time, mind you. Jabari Smith Jr. finished with 16 points overall, Sengun with 12 points overall, and Jalen with 8 points overall, as per all the voting and the point rules that we laid out before. But when I look at Jabari, part of this is, and I made this argument very briefly already, but it's just relative to where they were last year. And Jabari obviously had a really, really bad rookie year. So there is more room for him to improve, I think, than the other two guys, which gives him almost an unfair advantage to be the Rockets' most improved player because he was so bad last year for so much of his rookie season. So that's part of it. But the other parts that are less, I guess, negatively oriented towards Jabari have to do with, I expect him to take a big step forward offensively this year, like legitimately. I think we're going to see him actually put in some positions to succeed. I think hopefully we'll see Ime Udoka kind of utilize him in certain situations, maybe even a little Jason Tatum-esque with some of the spots that he gets the ball at on the floor, using his size to his advantage, maybe some touches kind of at the elbow, that kind of thing. And then defensively, I think there's a reason that Jabari got the DPOY votes from all of us, is because Jabari has a chance to be really special on that end, especially with Ime Udoka and with a team that has a bunch of personalities that are pointed towards the defensive side of the basketball now, with Dillon, with Fred, with Jabari, with Tari. I feel like I'm forgetting one person on this roster who is defensively oriented, and it's going to be so sad that I can't remember their name. And Ime as the head coach, right? A defense guy, defense first. So for that reason, and the step that I'm expecting him to take just overall, right? Overall, I think Jabari is going to be a lot better this year, but he's going to take a step forward offensively. I think he's going to take a massive step forward defensively. And for that reason, I think across the board, he will be the Rockets' most improved player. Maybe I think collectively, though, we are a little too down on Jalen Green. Sengun coming in second is really interesting because as you already kind of pointed out, if he was the Rockets' best player last year, how much better does he have to be this next season to also garner the most improved player award? Although he does clock in at like I think on FanDuel, he's clocked in at like plus 1,600 to win the Most Improved Player award. And he's the only Rocket on that list as far as the NBA award is concerned. So there's that too.
And I know we're talking about MVP next, and I'll give my reasonings there as we transition to who we feel the Rockets MVP will be. But there are certain things Alpi can do to really position himself to win MIP for the NBA. And I think he can do it based off of what we've seen so far in the summer.
Fully agree, and that's going to be an interesting award to keep an eye on throughout the regular season for this Rockets team. Absolutely. Coming up, we're going to get to the most anticipated award, the MVP trophy, and who we think that will belong to on the Houston Rockets this next season. We're going to get there in just one moment.
Welcome back to the last segment of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. I'm your non-sick co-host, Ali Khan Bijani, joined by our very sick co-host, Jackson Gatlin. Jackson, these sneezes have been really kicking your butt here during the breaks, huh?
They've been awful. I should release the raw footage and just put it on Twitter.
In the comments, I want our listeners to put what do they like to take when they're sick that really helps them get over their sickness fast. I think Jackson really needs some advice because we got to help him. We got to help our brother out here.
Can I cast my own vote in the YouTube comments and ask for somebody to just hit me with their car and put me out of my misery because I feel awful right now. All right. We saved the best for last. The MVP of your Houston Rockets, who we think has a chance to be the MVP of the team this next season. Now, I went very much against the grain here from the public opinion of MVP. So Twitter and YouTube polls were both in lockstep on this one. They had in order, first place through third place votes, Jalen Green, Alperen Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr. I did not go that direction. I went with my first place vote, Jabari Smith Jr. I went Jalen Green second as the MVP of the team. Yes.
Jabari Smith Jr. as MVP. Wow.
Jabari Smith Jr. MVP. I think we're in for I think Jabari is going to take. Here's my. I'm staking my claim right now. I have never wavered. I wanted Jabari. He was number one on my board the whole time. I think he's still going to be the best player from that draft class. I think he's going to take the biggest leap for the Rockets this next season.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So I'm firmly sticking with that, and I think he's going to be the most important player on the team based on how much of a step forward he takes offensively and defensively. So he's my first place vote. Jalen is my second place vote. Sengun is my third place vote. What about you, Alikon?
And is this pretty similar to what YouTube also has as well?
No, I went the inverse opinion. So YouTube had Jalen, Sengun, Jabari as their first through third identical. YouTube and Twitter were lockstep on that one.
Okay, and yours was okay.
Slightly different. Inverse, basically.
So I'll give you mine.
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's going to be Jalen, Alp, and Fred. And it wouldn't surprise me if Fred is actually number one at the end of this. But I still do think it's going to be Jalen, Alp, and Fred. And let me go through why I like Jalen and Alp, and then we can talk about Fred in a little bit. So for me with Jalen, the amount of work he's put in to being able to just correctly make reads, run a pick and roll, improve his ball handling, make it more tight with his dribble, kind of just, be more of an effective primary ball handler over the last 2 seasons he's been working on, especially this offseason. I think he takes the leap. And like I mentioned previously, everything I've heard, I know Jackson, you and I have talked about it privately, everything you've heard as well has been very positive to a point where, he has a lot of good high expectations from this team going into the season. And Fred is here to help elevate those expectations and elevate his play so he can meet them. And I think he does. And just from a pick and roll perspective, I think he just takes a tremendous leap. And adding more size, I think already last year we saw his free throw attempts go up. I think they're going to continue to stay consistently high, and he's going to continue to get to the free throw line. And then defensively, he's going to be able to make a better impact because he has more size upper body wise. Second for me is Alperen Sengun. Why? I think he's going to knock down 3-pointers at least a 35% rate. I'm very high on LP shooting the basketball this season. I think he will get the green light. he will need to have the green light, especially with the way Ime Udoka has played with two bigs in the past. And so I do feel like Alpi will have that chance to show that he can shoot the basketball, and his release, I don't want to say it's fast, but it's shown that it's gone quicker over the course of his play with the Turkish men's national team earlier in August. And then defensively, I think they're going to go to a more of a perimeter-based defense with him and allow him to show more, allow him to trap more, just do certain things that are different from a normal drop. And even when they do drop, I still think they will do considerable amounts of drop coverage. They're going to have better help side defensive rotations. You're not just going to have Jalen and KPJ and a lot of young players rotating over from the weak side and kind of hesitating. Do I stunt? Do I not? Jabari, in his first season struggling with the help side rotations. You're going to have Dillon Brooks. You're going to have Fred VanVleet on the opposite side playing the passing lanes. You're going to have two veterans who are there playing with him to make it easier on him as he's making a decision on whether or not to commit to the basketball and drop. So just for those reasons, I think he's going to take a next step. And then lastly, for Fred, just makes a lot of sense. He's going to have the ball in his hands a lot. I think he's going to have a resurgence playing with the coach that's going to put him in positions to be successful, but allow him to complement and use his play to complement other young players. So, he can be easily as high as 1 for me, but I think I'm going to put him at 3rd for now. But I think for those reasons, that is my list of 1, Jalen Green, 2, Alperen Sengun, and 3, Fred VanVleet.
It's the MVP award, at least as far as how we discuss it, as sports media, as fans of the game, whatever, is so intentionally vague, like the parameters surrounding it, because it kind of changes year in, year out what you actually award the MVP for. Some years it is some years it's the best player on the best team. Other times it's the player who did the most with the least or something like that. There's different iterations of the MVP award, right? And I'm very curious, our listeners' opinions of kind of where they were coming from when they voted on this one for Jalen, then Sengun, then Jabari, at least on the Twitter polls, the Twitter and the YouTube polls. Because for me, where I was coming from is I was thinking, and I always think about this, the most valuable player to me is the player who provides the most value intrinsically to his team. Right. And so I do think from that perspective, I think Fred could very easily be the Rockets MVP. I see your argument there, because for what he's going to provide to this team, the value that he's going to provide as a table setter, as a veteran leader, as somebody kind of calming things down when he's on the floor, that steadying hand, all of that, that's going to be invaluable. The shot making, the defense, all of it. I don't view this as the award for necessarily, this is going to be the best player next season, or the Rockets' best player. Jalen Green could very easily still be the Rockets' best player next season, but I think that my personal opinion is that Jabari will be the Rockets' MVP, at least as far as the way that I've tallied it, because I think his impacts and his contributions on the defensive and offensive ends are going to be invaluable to what this team is hopefully trying to achieve as far as making it back to the play-in tournament.
Yeah, and I really feel like as we're going into next season too, Jackson, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this as well. What does it look like for you to have a successful season? Is Jabari needing to be the MVP for this team to go into a play-in? Does Jalen need to be an MVP? Does a certain player becoming an MVP lead to this team becoming a play-in kind of caliber team? Just curious your thoughts.
Well, if we're talking about like an actual MVP, like a league-wide MVP, not just a Rockets MVP, then absolutely. I fully agree with that sentiment that yes, if any of one of these guys, if Jalen took the leap, if Jabari took the leap, and they were suddenly at an MVP level of production, then absolutely. I
don't necessarily see them as an MVP at an NBA level, but I'm saying who
on this team needs to take a leap for them to be like, do you want to rephrase it a little bit?
MVP, or who needs to be the best player on this team next season for them to be able to be a play-in team?
Okay. In looking at it through that lens, I think the Rockets have a better chance if Jabari takes that leap, right, and is the Rockets' most valuable player or their most improved, whatever. If I could pick one player to take the leap for this Rockets team, I think I believe in, I guess, Jabari's archetype, or the way that he impacts winning or projects to impact winning with the type of player that he is, more so than a Jalen or a Sengun, right? I think that Jalen's archetype is great. We see it with the Devin Bookers, the Bradley Beals, the Zach LaVines, that volume shooting guard point of it, tip of the spear type guy. And I think that type of player is great at elevating the ceiling of a very good team to be potentially an all-time team. I don't know if that type of player is good at necessarily elevating the floor of a team is basically my argument. I think Jalen is going to be, if not one day, an amazing like tier 1 scorer, primary option on championship contender, he's going to be a phenomenal like second option type guy. And he's going to be able to help elevate a team into that next echelon of competitiveness. But what he provides to a team doesn't necessarily raise the floor right now. If he adds the playmaking, great. If he becomes a better defender, then great. Those things kind of help balance out the rest of his game. But currently, right now, what we know about him, I'm going with the Jabari archetype personally.
For me, it comes down to having a guy at the perimeter who can have the ball in their hands and make plays. And that's why I put Jalen there. I think LP also, if he improves defensively, allows you just to have that solidify that 5 spot and really allow you to kind of experiment with different playmakers on the floor next to LP. So for me, just those two, if one of them becomes that Rockets level MVP for them, for the team, I think they are able to compete for a play-in spot. And that's why you bring in veterans. We're talking about here, Jackson, a 20 to 25 win increase in order to solidify a play-in spot. Okay? So it's not just a combination of Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks coming here along with Jock Longdale. It's about which one of these guys takes that leap, not only as a most improved player, but also as an MVP. And realistically, you need Jalen or Jabari or LP to be a part of that to give you that 2025 win increase. And as of right now, that is the primary question. We can do all these exercises and we can have these MVPs, but does their play, and when we label them as an MVP, does that play lead them to helping this team make a play-in game? And that is what I'm trying to figure out right now. And my honest perspective is, I think you need Jalen and LP as a combination to be those guys to carry this team to a play-in.
You've been beating that drum for a while that this Rockets offense should be built around the Jalen LP 2-man game. We've been saying that for best play for 7 months.
Yeah, it was their best play for 2 years. Literally, you put 3 guys on one side of the floor. It's the perfect alignment. Have an empty corner, no help defenders going to come from that near side corner. Jalen loves attacking baseline. Nobody can stop him. LP loves going in the middle and kind of getting to a drop step or posting up against a mismatch. Just makes so much sense. And I think you're finally going to see a lot more of that this season. And it'll hopefully allow these two to elevate their games into being MVP, MIP, whatever types of players they can be to help this Rockets team.
Also, Jabari looks like he can dribble a basketball now, and that's huge. So based on how he looked at Summer League.
Attack a closeout. You said put him in the elbows. I think putting LP in the post or in the dunker spot, putting Jabari on the elbows, putting Jalen on the wings where he can kind of go to his dominant hand and go left to right or go baseline. The scouting report is there for what these guys need to be successful, and they're going to add more versatility to their game and more variability. And we'll see that, from this past offseason when they played in October. But the formula is there. You know what this team is good at. Now it's about, can the coaching staff put it together, and can the players execute for this team to be successful?
Who do you think will be the Houston Rockets' most improved player, defensive player of the year, and MVP? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Alikhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
Follow me on X, Twitter at Rockets_insider. So I'm going to be back doing videos for this season, and Jackson's helping me with that. So stay tuned for some film room videos that will kind of break down different things going into the season. I'm really excited to kind of restart that. So appreciate you for following along, and see you guys next week.
That's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Rockets. As always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts, or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.